Okay, so this is week 4, and what we're doing tonight is that we are starting to consciously move towards what's described as the mandala of wisdom. So a mandala, in case you're not aware of that term, simply means a pattern that is arranged always in relation to a central point. It's a gathering in patterns that bring a whole range of different objects or senses or experiences or thoughts into relation to a central point. So I'll say more about this mandala when we get to it in what I'm going to say tonight. So what we're going to be looking at this evening is really this transitional space between the realm as depicted in the Wheel of Life and the kind of the image, the understanding, the vision, if you like, of what it means to be liberated and be in direct connection to wisdom. So, the Wheel of Life that we looked at near the beginning, if you remember, or if you've seen this image before, you'll recognise that the whole wheel, this whole expression of the poisons is held by this quite terrifying figure. So this figure is called Yama, and he's the Lord of Death. So everyone every being in the realms, the 6 realms that are being inhabited through our attempts at trying to resist this truth that we will die. In fact, we've never been born, but that's another whole story. But so we are resisting because we're trying to create permanence, we're trying to create substantiality. What we do is that we kind of construct these fabricated views and perceptions of how this reality is. We do it in relation to death as a way of avoiding our own death and the death of all those that we love and cherish. So that's a cheery old start to talk. Anyone more? So we will continue. So we are resisting, we're creating these poisons primarily out of resistance. So the primary act, if you like, of the spiritual life is working to let go of our resistance to our actual experience. And it's that process of relaxing and opening into what is actually present within us that leads us, that guides us, that invites us towards wisdom. So it's actually quite counterintuitive in a way, the spiritual life, in that a lot of us probably think that when we sit down to meditate or when we come along to a Buddhist centre, we're trying to get something, we're trying to gain, we're trying to add something, bring something into our life. But actually, from this perspective, what we're really inviting us all to do is actually just relax and let go and become present into this experience, rather than trying to fix ourselves, fix the world, create some sort of solidity, create permanence. Actually, just let go, relax, and all will be well. So this is actually the process that we engage in to become fully present in our experience as the basis of entering the mandala of wisdom. So this is an image of the mandala. So as I said at the beginning, a mandala is, so we have a collection of Buddha figures. This is the mandala of the Dhyani Buddhas. So these are aspects of the liberated mind. They are the activity of a liberated mind. And I was going to start talking about this week, but because I've got so much else to say, I'm afraid you're going to wait until the last week before we actually get to the Buddhas. So just be patient, we will get there. But this week, we're just kind of flagging this up, that this is the image of wisdom, the 5 wisdoms that we've been kind of I've been pointing towards. We're trying to bring this liberated mind, this liberated being, we're trying to bring it into relationship to the wheel of life. So it's this dynamic relationship which we're trying to establish and nurture through really entering our actual experience. So the Buddha mandala, what it's doing is it's pointing to actually the qualities of the Buddha's responses, which is arising out of union with wisdom. So the wisdom mind isn't actually portrayed in the Buddha mandala. It's actually the activity that is being described in the Buddha mandala. So we have to know that sitting behind or within the Buddha's responses is, I've stolen this little phrase, the breath of the wisdom mind. So the breath breathes quietly into our experience, inviting us into wisdom, inviting us to live out of that deep knowing that arises out of our actual experience. So this is where, this is the mandala that is being informed, being breathed into by wisdom. So in the Vajrayana tradition, this is the latest flower, the sort of, most recent flowering of the Buddhist tradition. It's said to be that wisdom and activity are kind of in union with each other. In a way, you can't have, wisdom would just remain kind of in potentiality unless it was lived out in activity in the world for the benefit of all. So they're completely interwoven, and equally there would be no value in simply trying to act if there was no foundation, no kind of core of knowing within that activity. So the two are utterly interwoven with each other. And as you can see, the figures in this example, at least, they carry the Vajra, which I talked about quite a bit last week. So the Vajra and this symbol are quite intimately connected with each other. So wisdom, action, wisdom and activity are completely entwined. And the other thing to kind of bear in mind, just to make it more complicated as a kind of visual knowing, is that we have the 5 Buddhas sitting in a sort of collective related mandala, but actually each Buddha also sits within its own mandala. So there is these interpenetrating mandalas, this patterning of experience, each personifying a very particular aspect of the liberated mind, the wisdom mind, flowing into the world. So I'd say a bit more about the mandala itself in a moment. So what we'll probably be familiar with in our experience is that we are taught, sometimes the path of Buddhist practice is described as the path of ethics, meditation and wisdom, the threefold path. And we have in ourselves, we have a mandala in the sense that we try to establish a central core of values in which all the other aspects of our life can come into relationship to that central core. So what we consciously try to do in Buddhist practice is the practice of ethics. So this is important to remember that ethics is the cultivation of intention, or sensitivity to the intention behind our actions. So there's not just actions and kind of looking at the surface level of our actions in the world, but it's what is actually driving that activity, what's the deeper intentions. So we can appear outwardly to be doing something very good, if you like to use that, put that in inverted commas, but actually underneath it there might be quite an unhealthy intention. So we really have to explore what is the intentions behind our actions, and this is the basis of Buddhist ethics. And if we want to develop wisdom, the suggestion is that we cultivate sensitivity to the underlying views behind our actions and open into the suffering that they are creating. So our views are creating our experience of the wheel of life. It's the views that bind us to the wheel, and the exploring and releasing, relaxing into those views as fully as possible, recognizing that those views, just in their very nature, are binding us, creating a particular way of being, which generates suffering for us. Because inevitably, any view ultimately wants to be protected, wants to be held on to, wants to be made permanent, and of course, we're always in flux. So really becoming sensitive to the way our views are really locking us into a particular way of being, when we can really see into that, see through that, this is the basis of wisdom. So what we're being invited to do is actually, as I said at the beginning, we're being invited to step into our direct experience. And I'll just say a bit about the mandala here. So stepping into direct experience, we step into a mandala, if you like. We step through the gates into this sacred space. And you'll see on the outer rim of the mandala, probably not very well in this particular image, but actually the outer edge of the mandala is encircled by flames. So you'll know probably in your experience, when you step into direct experience and try to stay with it, initially that's okay, but after a period of time you just want to get out of there. Who wants to stay in their own experience ongoingly? I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I think most of us, we can drop in and out of just being with our actual experience. So actually to actively try to stay in our experience, what we're really doing is stepping into this fire of awareness, the fire that's actually we can experience is actually kind of really burning us up as we try to stay in awareness. So this is the first thing through, as we step into the mandala, we actually step through these flames, and they both kind of hold us in awareness, encourage us, invite us into awareness, and they hold us there. This is the invitation. And actually the red ring that I put on there, it actually obscures, actually at each of the edge, around the edge of the outer edge of the mandala, there are protectors of the mandala. These incredible figures, quite wrathful figures, who kind of, you want to come in here? Welcome, but once you're in, you're in. So as you know, probably again in your own experience, meditation and developing awareness is very double-edged. And we might, having been around for a little while, after a few years, we might think, oh, I wish I could just go unconscious again. But actually, you just can't. Once you're in, I'm afraid you just have to keep going until you're liberated. I'm sorry to let you in on this secret, but that is what's happening. So we're held in the mandala by these protectors that we can't go unconscious again. We've seen into how things really are. At least we've had sufficient glimpses to know that we are here. This is where we have to travel. So that's the outer edge, is the flames, and then within next line in, there is the Vajras, which I talked quite a bit about last week. So this symbolism of the sort of unification of opposites, the unification of difference, and the kind of reminder that everything is essentially and completely and utterly interwoven with emptiness, with shunyata. So that's the next kind of layer that we step through. And then the next layer in is a layer of lotus petals. So this is the blossoming of our life, the blossoming of our potential. We step into that blossoming, we engage with our experience, and we're held in that naturally unfolding flower, lotus flower. So this is the path that we have been invited into, and we may have blindly stumbled into it, but this is what we're doing. We are moving in the direction of liberation by stepping into our personal mandala, our personal direct experience, which eventually will become these liberated expressions of wisdom. So before we go any further, I have to introduce you to this figure. So this figure is called the Dakini. So the Dakini is the personification of wisdom. This is actually really says something about, you want to know how things really are? Well, welcome. Welcome to my world. This liberated, completely free state of the Dakini. So I'm going to just, I haven't got time to kind of say much, but I'll just give you a reading. It's quite a long reading, but it just kind of evokes, I think, something of this figure. So the reason that I'm evoking this figure is that, as I've been saying, that this stepping into the mandala, stepping into the reality of trying to release from our patterning, release from our habits into a more open, liberated state, actually when it starts to happen, can be really quite challenging. It's disturbing when change actually starts to take place. when it's just happening around us, I mean, we're all kind of aging, as you know, possibly. That's challenging enough in itself. Brushing your teeth in the evening, oh my God, who is that person looking back? But so that it kind of creeps up on us as an experience, and that is challenging. But actually, when we try to release from a particular view that we may have about ourselves, that also, when it really starts to connect with us, starts to become more real, we recognise how challenging that is, how disturbing it is to let in change, to allow ourselves to reconfigure as a being is challenging. It's disorientating. We don't know who we are anymore. Even to go back to the story of the fisher person with the fish basket over their head. You know, at least with those foul smells, we know who we are. We know where we are. But actually, when we take the fish basket off, it's really challenging them to kind of try to allow ourselves to meet the world as it really is. So the Dakini really symbolises this experience. So I'm just going to read this out. So just to start with, so the Dakini, they're the place where they're most easily found, and their kind of place of their home, if you like, is called the charnel ground. So the charnel ground is the place where the bodies are taken to be burnt, to be hacked to pieces, to be scattered for the wild animals and birds of the air to come and devour them. And the place is filled with bodies in various states of decay, various states of dismemberment, and the smell is quite overpowering. It's usually in a desolate place, no other human habitation around. And it's often held within the walls of the charnel ground. It's often an enclosed space. So this is where the Dakini is to be found. The Dakini dances in the charnel ground, reminding the practitioner of the destruction of all that self holds dear. Unlike conventional women who cover their repulsiveness, that's inverted commas, with ornaments and cosmetics, she is naked, the quality of awareness itself. Rather than deceptively posing as what she's not, the Dakini has nothing to hide and displays her secrets for all who have the realization to see. Still, she wears a few beautiful garments and pieces of jewellery gleaned from the jhanal existence, chosen to ornament and accentuate her nakedness, and yet to remind the practitioner of the devastated setting. Her bone jewellery includes a crown of 5 dried skulls and carved earrings, necklace, anklets and bracelets fashioned of bleached human bone. Her skirt a dazzling lattice of bone fragments, swinging and clattering as she dances. She carries 2 implements. The skull cup of fresh blood in her left hand, normally considered repulsive, is for her the nectar of the deathlessness. And the knife in her right hand has a long convex blade suitable for slicing, its end in a curved hook useful for tearing the flesh, the classic implement of the charnel ground. Both are symbols of wisdom, showing the cutting through qualities and the intoxicating quality. When the wisdom Dakini skillfully joins the extremes and dualities of life, she holds power at once ambiguous and dangerous. Her female body might conventionally be seen as an object of desire and as a birth giver, which ties her to the powerful forces of nature. But the Vajrayana, this latest phase of Buddhism, understanding of the Dakini's power goes further. Her highest power has only nominal relationship to her ties with the natural world. She gazes into unfathomable space, and her body itself is luminous, empty of solidity. She embodies the teachings of emptiness in a uniquely Vajrayana way. She is the manifestation of co-emergent wisdom. She brings both poles of attraction and revulsion directly onto the path of realization. She cannot be conceptualized or categorized. She stops the mind. The Dakini refuses to accept the logic of life versus death, gain versus loss, pain versus pleasure. This logic is the reasoning of the endless cycle of suffering in which we are trapped. And when we perpetuate this approach, we also are trapped in samsaric prison. The Dakini shows the landscape in which the hopeless logic disintegrates and we directly experience the world as it is, infused with intensity and natural power. In this charnel ground, beauty has no rival in ugliness. The polarities have collapsed, and great joy is found in the greatest devastation. This is the power of the dancing Dakini. So, what I'm going to say very briefly a bit about now is what's called the spiral path, which is one way of expressing this transition from the wheel of life to the five Buddha mandala, the wisdom, this transformation of the poisons into wisdom. And as you can see in this description of the path, the first thing that we have to come into relationship to is our own experience of suffering. This is actually the basis of the path. If we're not in connection with this nature of suffering in our own personal experience, then we can't even step onto the path. So this is why actual experiences seem to be so central to the path. We need this capacity to be able to know and investigate, be confident in actually it's fruitful to explore dukkha, this quality of suffering. And the more that we can allow ourselves to enter into this reality, we then naturally deepen our faith in the practices. We can deepen into the faith in actually engaging with actual experience is absolutely central to this arising of faith in the practice of awareness. To see that that is sufficient, that actually what we're trying to do is really have confidence in that our own experience as it is, if we really explore it, is sufficient. If we really enter fully into our experience, the Dakini will arise. And that transforms through into this continuing flow of actually the joy, the release of engaging in practice. Actually, even though on one level we might experience it as being quite difficult, quite uncomfortable, actually there's a real almost a perverse satisfaction, pleasure in actually the delights of developing this capacity to stay with our experience. And that intensifies as we continue to practice into phases, into moments, a real rapture. So the rapture is this whole sense of the whole body being flowing with energy, moving through us, rattling our very being. Gradually that settles into a sense of equanimity. It's described as tranquility here for some reason. But so this equanimity to be with our experience. And so it goes on. We gradually move towards the liberated state. So this model, Sangharakshita describes in great detail in a book called The Three Jewels. If you're interested in exploring more about the spiral path, it's quite unusual teaching for Buddhist practice, but it's one that Sangharakshita, I found, really promoted as a very helpful description of this, the path that moves us between the poison, the wheel of life, and the Buddha mandala. So do have a look at that if you're interested in that particular aspect of what I'm saying. But just to go back to the mandala image, what I'm kind of just to remind us is that we are being encouraged to really stay in our actual experience. This is the kind of invitation. And it's actually, it is this being willing to stay in our experience. This is the price of wisdom. There's no shortcut to moving from a deluded state without travelling through, being willing to engage and explore our actual experience. Become familiar with all our patterning, become familiar with all our madness. This is the territory that we're kind of looking at to explore as fully as possible in order to recognise within and completely interwoven with that is this sense of spaciousness, of expansiveness, of potentiality, of creativity, of spontaneity, all these wonderful qualities that arise quite naturally the more we can really relax down into our experience. So just a couple more slides to finish. I just wanted to say a little bit about, well, how can we do, what's the kind of the actuality of how we move from these ideas into kind of felt experience. So the first thing to say is that we do need to sort of travel this path. We do need real care and sensitivity, I would say patience as well, and kindness to gradually open into our experience of the body. For many of us, we carry quite difficult material in the body. So we need to bring this sensitivity and kind of the pacing of how we engage with the felt experience. But the main things that we're kind of starting to just on a very basic level, as we've done just in that few minutes of meditation, what we're being invited down into really exploring any sense of density, of movement, directionality, where the edges of this experience, where's the energy, what is vibrating in our being, are there any colours, any sense of temperature or intensity of sensation. So there's a whole range of different ways of just kind of flagging up just the kind of, I suppose, the breadth of this field of the body, the feeling level to our experience, which is so primary to practice. We can't find liberation through the head. We can't, it's not a conceptual exercise. We need to bring our knowing down into the body. It's so primary as a source of real liberation. So we need the body. It's no It's not a chance occurrence that we are embodied. This is actually the vehicle for our liberation. So it's absolutely key that we engage with this vehicle. But we don't want to deny that we do have thoughts, we have a mind, and in Buddhism, mind isn't just the mental activity, it's actually the heart response as well. So it's this mixture of head and heart. And I'm suggesting that actually what we're trying to do in part of practice is just this really, what is this? Being curious about what is actually our experience, what is actually in our experience. And we can tend to get very, well, it's obviously that, or this, or that. So try to recognize that most of our experience has different layers or different levels to it. So trying to deliteralize just that one interpretation of our experience. Because when we look more deeply into our experience, we may find that there are gifts to be found in this, our current experience. So a few examples. So when we are in relationship, in kind of some conversation or something's happening around us, sometimes we might notice that we have an emotional response to the experience which seems completely out of proportion to the actual triggering event. There seem to be a few smiles of recognition, which is good. So this is what we do. Something happens and suddenly we've loaded all this material onto this innocent moment. And we do that over and over because we're trying to reinforce a sense of a big self. We're trying to replay a previous version of who we were, of how we understood ourselves to be. So it's a very helpful aspect of our experience to bring attention to. When am I being activated? When is this? When is the emotional tone that I'm suddenly find myself in? When is it? What has brought that about? And another aspect is that we do get obsessed. Thoughts, events, moments, relationships, conversations, we tend to kind of circle around them over and over again. And why are we doing that? What are we playing out there? So really being willing to open into these questions, we may experience and we may discover that there's some gift within that exploration. What draws us to particular fantasies? I'm sure I'm not the only one that runs and reruns particular fantasies. And they, in a way, they're kind of wishful fulfillment, or maybe just reruns of particular experiences that we may have had. But what is drawing us? What are those fantasies drawing us? What's the kind of experiences that they are activating in the body, the heart, mind? And we might also want to just become a bit more alert, alive to our dream life. I know some people, it's quite a practice to keep a dream diary. Just have a diary by your bed and a pen and a torch, and just, if you come out of a dream, just bring yourself into the moment, write it down, and then fall asleep again. It's a kind of fascinating process, just where does that come from? But it's also really, it's a precious gift. All this material that is flowing through our life that often we are just missing because we've got a fixed view of who we are, how the world is. So we miss these gifts. And then there's the whole territory of images, stories, and other people, human beings, that we feel either drawn or repulsed by. So really noticing that push and pull at images, at stories, at other people. It's often the people that drive us the most mad. They're the ones that are showing us parts of our own experience that actually we find unbearable to be with. So by really noticing when we are repulsed by another, what a gift, what an invitation to explore our own, what we've banished from our own experience. And finally, to say something about the kind of real positive aspects of really deliteralizing our activity, is that when we do start to relax and open it into a more kind of fluid state, we can really delight in synchronicity. I hope you've had the experience of where you feel more attuned to the kind of wider field of your life. Often things seem to arise completely that are just perfect in the moment, that bring meaning, bring kind of confirmation, bring magic into our experience. So really delighting in this potential of the creative mind to bring liberation through trusting the interconnected universe that we inhabit. So once again, I'm going to show you this image. I'm not going to say anything about it because of the time, but this really will be what I'm going to be looking at next week. I promise. We will get it. So this is the relationship between the poisons and the wisdoms. So I'm just giving you a little glimpse of that. That's where we will be going next week. And just to finish, one more delightful image. I just love this. This is a Garuda. So a Garuda is a being that is half human, half bird. So they can live in the air and on the earth. And their capacity is that they can take in the poisons as symbolized by the serpent in the mouth. They can digest the poisons into wisdom. So their capacity to be broad enough, full enough to inhabit different realms gives them this additional capacity to transform poison into wisdom. So that's as far as I can go tonight. But next week, hopefully, we'll get to some certainly pointing towards the potential of all this that we've been talking about for the arising of wisdom.